Photography has accompanied adventure and learning into the natural world since its beginnings. Join us as we journey through 100 years of nature photography, celebrating the visionaries that have shaped the way we perceive the natural world, revealing its wonders and fragility. In the time leading up to the invention of photography, images of nature were commonly engraved, drawn, or painted. The artists who created these illustrations were highly skilled at depicting botanical and animal specimens in exquisite detail, but the time required to produce them meant that documenting nature was a slow and laborious process that relied heavily on an artist's interpretation. The invention of photography changed all this, transforming how we document the natural world and revolutionizing the knowledge and study of specimens. This image of a buckler fern is one of the world's oldest photographs. Made by the English scientist and inventor William Henry Fox Talbot around 1839, the process involved placing the fern on paper, brushed with a light-sensitive silver solution and exposing it to the sun. Talbot called this process photogenic drawing, and it would be the foundational work for photography as we know it today. Talbot continued his experiments and in 1841 patented his negative photographic process, which he called the calotype. The calotype process dramatically reduced the exposure time needed to make the image and allowed for the creation of a paper negative from which multiple positive prints could be made. This was crucial for the future development of nature photography, as it meant images could be reproduced and distributed more easily. Here we have two of Talbot's earliest cameras made between 1839 and 1848. These were small, simple wooden boxes that earned the nickname Mousetraps from his wife Constance. The cameras were typically 2 or 3 inch cubes and crafted from wood. One of the earliest was reportedly fashioned from a cigar box sawn in half. Talbot fitted these small boxes with lenses taken from telescope and microscope eyepieces. He deliberately chose a small camera format to concentrate available light onto a small area and used lenses with relatively large apertures to maximize light gathering. He would have put his sensitized paper into the back here, inserted it back into the camera, and removed this cover to expose his paper. This could have taken anywhere from hours to a full day to make a photograph. In 1844, Talbot published his groundbreaking publication, The Pencil of Nature. One of the earliest commercially available books illustrated with photographs, Talbot recognized both the artistic and practical implications of photography. For nature photography, this meant the ability to accurately document specimens and landscapes while also creating aesthetically pleasing images. In The Pencil of Nature, Talbot says that with photography, instead of individually illustrating each piece of hay for a haystack, that you could create an image all at once. Around the same time as Talbot's experiments in Britain, Louis Daguerre in France was developing a photographic process that created a positive image directly onto a silver copper plate without a negative. These daguerreotypes are by Horatio Ross, who took up photography in 1845. Daguerreotypes of apparently spontaneous outdoor scenes are rare, since the process was more easily controlled in a studio. This unusual image may well be the first photograph of fly fishing. While this one depicts Ross's wife with a rifle aimed at what appears to be a stag, but was actually staged antlers made to look like a hunting scene. The English botanical artist, collector, and photographer Anna Atkins revolutionized nature photography with her striking cyanotypes that showcase the scientific form of her specimens while also celebrating their artistic value. The cyanotype process was invented by the Victorian chemist and astronomer Sir John Herschel in 1842 and involved placing an object on paper coated with a solution of iron salts before exposing it to sunlight. A year later, in 1843, Atkins compiled her cyanotypes of wet algae into her publication British Algae, Cyanotype Impressions, the world's first photographically illustrated book. Invented by Frederick Scott Archer in 1851, the wet collodion process would dominate photography for around 30 years until it was replaced by the dry plate. Although it produced crisper images and was relatively more reliable and faster than earlier processes, it still required a long exposure time, a bulky camera, and involved a large amount of complicated chemistry. Roger Fenton's photographic van shows just how much equipment was needed to take a photograph in the field at this time. Besides all the cumbersome equipment, it was still virtually impossible to take a clean photograph of a moving animal because of the long exposure times needed. This meant that photographers would often fake a scene by placing a taxidermied animal into what would be its natural habitat. Over time, field cameras were developed to be more portable than the larger view cameras. They were collapsible and often had handles, making them easier to carry and maneuver. The invention of dry plates in the 1870s by the English photographer and physician Richard Leach Maddox was a key technological advancement that helped nature photography flourish in the late 19th and early 20th centuries. The dry plate process used a glass plate pre-coated with a gelatin emulsion of silver bromide that produced a much sharper image than earlier processes. Dry plates were also more light-sensitive than wet plates, which meant exposure times were shorter and anything on the move could now be captured with less blurring. Another pioneering figure in the history of photography was Eadweard Muybridge. He revolutionized nature and animal photography through his groundbreaking motion studies. His technique revealed details in animal movement that was normally invisible to the naked eye. His most famous work was capturing horses in motion using multiple cameras, proving that all 4 hooves leave the ground during a gallop and settling a long-standing debate. The 1880s saw the emergence of the platinum process. This was a refined printing technique that produced images with a wide tonal range and softness. The V&A has 183 of Henry Irving's tree, bark, and foliage studies taken in and around London from about 1899 to 1922. You can see that Irving was a master of the process in the detailed outline of individual branches and texture of the bark, leaves, and flowers. Platinum prints became less common after the outbreak of the First World War, as platinum was an excellent catalyst for explosives and was therefore too precious a material to use for printing. Innovation wasn't just restricted to the photographic process or camera technology. In the late 19th and early 20th centuries, brothers Richard and Sherry Kearton were pioneering techniques for photographing wildlife in their natural habitats. They developed ingenious camouflage hides, including artificial tree trunks, a hollow ox, a stuffed sheep, and a wooden mask to get close to animals without disturbing them. Their daredevil improvising allowed them to capture unprecedented images of birds and other wildlife, including the first photograph of a bird's nest with eggs in 1892. Equally inspirational and innovative was the pioneering British nature photographer and filmmaker Oliver Pike. Pike wrote many books on natural history and wildlife photography and produced some of the earliest wildlife films, helping to bring nature closer to the public and fostering an appreciation for wildlife and conservation. In 1907, we see the introduction of the autochrome, color photographs on glass developed and patented by the Lumiere brothers, Auguste and Louis. The autochrome was the first widely available and commercially viable method for producing color photographs after decades of failed attempts by various inventors. They are incredible objects, but their fragility and their extreme light sensitivity means that many haven't survived. Naturalists and field clubs like the Royal Geographic Society use lantern slides to share images of specimens, wildlife, and landscapes during meetings and lectures. As a result, lantern slides became an essential tool for spreading knowledge about the natural world and fostering public interest in nature and conservation. Over a 60-year career, Eric Hosking became one of the world's most accomplished natural history photographers and among the first photographers in Britain to make a full-time living from wildlife photography. Adopting wildlife photography as a profession meant Hosking occupied a new kind of role in photography where the focus wasn't on recording animal or plant specimens, but more about producing visually impactful images for the general public. Quickening exposure time was a crucial part of photographic development, but even as film and cameras became more advanced, taking images of objects moving at high speed was still difficult until later in the 20th century. In the early 1970s, British wildlife photographer Stephen Dalton became the first photographer to capture sharp images of insects in flight, using custom-made equipment and innovative flash techniques. His groundbreaking book, Born on the Wind of 1975, showcased these remarkable photographs, setting new standards in wildlife photography. Color photography is everywhere now, but it wasn't until the 1970s that it became widely used for professionals, amateurs, and households alike. Before the 70s, color film was significantly more expensive than black and white and more difficult to work with. Nature photographers embraced color as the technology improved. The ability to capture vibrant flowers, colorful birds, and lush landscapes in their true hues made nature photography more engaging and impactful. Color images help to enhance public appreciation for nature's beauty, fostering a greater interest in conservation efforts. As we face unprecedented ecological challenges, the power of nature photography to inspire, educate, and advocate for conservation has never been more crucial. The legacy of these visionaries continues to shape how we see, understand, and protect our planet.